Physical and environmental security, so making sure that access to the data centers are secured. A lot of times with smaller and mid-sized businesses, this is really outsourced. So you're talking more about if you run co-location services with a data center service somewhere, or if you're operate completely in a cloud environment, you use Microsoft Office 365 as a platform, for example. Well, then the physical security about where your information assets are stored is for the most part taken care of. But recognize that this isn't just digital assets, digital information. This is also involving paper information as well. Operational security, the two most significant areas here are change management, that changes are properly vetted, approved, and followed through and documented, and making sure that the different environments of development, so development, testing, and operational environments are separated so that you wouldn't have the same person who is a code developer develop code and then implement that code in production, because obviously that could open up the door for a developer to put in a backdoor without it being detected. Then there's also other organizational items such as protection against malware, backup, logging and monitoring, vulnerability management. These are all a lot of technical controls that need to be in place for ensuring the security in the environment. And then communication security. So here, network services, making sure that the network devices are managed properly and that the networks are designed properly, which a big chunk of that is ensuring segregation in networks. In other words, different security zones based on the criticality of the systems and information involved. The methodologies by which the information is transferred as well too, ensuring that the most basic example is that information in transit is encrypted, of course. But this also goes into confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements. So remember, you're talking about information exchange. It's not just a technical control that we're thinking about here, but this is ensuring that when you share confidential information with partners, that there's that protection behind it, that there's at least this agreement in place that says that, hey, we have agreed to keep this secure. System acquisition, development, and maintenance. Well, this is, again, just ensuring that whenever we get different packages or different equipment into the environment, that we review it. Patching is a good example, for example, that we often don't want to just put in apply a new Microsoft patch across the organization without testing it to see how it might affect our systems, because Microsoft can't test this against every single configuration out there, because that's virtually, it's infinite for the most part. Not quite, but it's about as close as you can get. And then also making sure that that when code is developed and or if it's developed in an outsourced environment, that there are controls in place there to examine the code and make sure that there aren't some security vulnerabilities in there, and to have a methodology for testing those vulnerabilities, and then once they're mitigated, to accept the code as is. Supplier relationships, third-party relationships. Again, this kind of dovetails with how we have so many instances nowadays of small and mid-sized businesses using outsourced data centers and other outsourced elements such as Office 365. And so you need to make sure that they're taking care of your data when it's in their possession, because even though they are possessing the data, even if they don't have access to it, they are possessing it. But the responsibility of securing the data and securing its privacy still falls upon you, the small and mid-sized business, that you can never offload that responsibility. Information security incident management is an important factor, because despite all the previous controls, incidents will happen, and you need to be prepared for that. You need to have a good plan in place to respond. You need to know that all of the folks that are involved in your incident response team understand their roles and responsibilities and have been trained, and most importantly have been tested A lot of times organizations will have an information response plan in place, but they will never have done a tabletop exercise with it. And this also involves collection of evidence to make sure that from a chain of custody and a forensics angle, that there are procedures in place to ensure the quality of the evidence and that it doesn't inadvertently get either destroyed, or even if you have a gap in the chain of custody, that could render that evidence not useful in an investigation. And then information security aspects of business continuity management, because there are some aspects with regards to business continuity. Business continuity, for the most part, is a business issue. It's not an IT issue. It's not an information security issue, but there are IT and security aspects. So the IT aspect of it typically is disaster recovery. The actual spinning up of systems, making sure that all of that information is accessible again in the event of an incident. For information security, the primary concern is to make sure that there is information security continuity during the entire process. Because when you're in a business continuity event, there is a much higher chance of perhaps there being a gap in information security controls, and we want to make sure we mitigate that. And then finally, there's compliance. Compliance is talking not so much not only rather about external requirements such as PCI, which is a standard, or HIPAA, which is a regulation, or the GDPR, which is a regulation that is not a United States regulation, but still has definitely effects within the United States, but also internal policies and procedures. How do you measure compliance there, and how do you make sure that the folks are actually, staff is technically compliant?